My name is Maria Norman, and I'm an artist, filmmaker, drag performer, costume maker, priestess of nature, and independent researcher. I research subjects and persons from the art, dance, and entertainment world of the so-called La Belle Époque. The time span roughly between the years 1871 and 1914. I especially specialize in the early Moulin Rouge, the legendary cabaret in Montmartre, Paris. So here is my nerd review of the Moulin Rouge film from 2001. First things first though, the costumes and music in the movie is a mix of styles from the early 1900s to the 1990s, which is done on purpose and with intent. Therefore, it's also historically inaccurate and anachronistic. I know, for example, that the actual undergarments of the original Moulin Rouge dancers didn't look like the ones they wear in the film. Also, I won't go into the love story itself, or the fact that being deathbed style ill with consumption or tuberculosis makes you very unlikely to be able to sing, dance, and stand up, for example. Or I can, in fact, go into it a little bit. I can tell you that the cancan dancer Tour Eiffel is rumored to have had tuberculosis and died in 1892 after performing the splits. Except that you cannot die from performing the splits, even if you have tuberculosis. So another story is that she died after performing in this kind of cortege on Mardi Gras, half naked and consumptuous in February in the rain. Anyway, consumption is said to have been her cause of death. Tuberculosis is mentioned in an 1890s book on can-can dancers and dance halls. Quote, "The terrible consumption that struck that year and opened such wide breaches in the ranks of the battalion of mad heroines of pleasure." End quote. This text refers to the fact that many of the dancers did succumb to consumption and left vacancies in the dance troupes. So my movie analysis or fact check will be partly what was going on in the historic Moulin Rouge in the years 1899 to 1900. How much of the film is accurate, so to speak? Which characters are actual historic persons and what were they up to in 1899? And I will comment on things in the movie that I really like, where I feel that they have captured something from the era, or the opposite, where I feel something is either missing or inaccurate. But not inaccurate as in anachronistic, because that it is. The historic characters. Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec. Yes, he was an actual historic person. And kudos to the film for stating his full name, Henri Marie Raymond de Toulouse-Lautrec Montfort. He was a nobleman whose line could be traced back some 1,000+ years. And he was a French artist. And he is the reason why the Moulin Rouge and Montmartre nightlife of the 1890s is this known to us, and that his art is one of the main reasons it is this iconic. In 1899, he was alive, but had spent that spring of that year in a mental institution after experiencing delirium tremens, alcohol-induced delirium, a condition which often manifests as extreme confusion. By this time, he was a grave alcoholic and also syphilitic. The party hard, work hard man we see in the film is more of a Toulouse-Lautrec of the late 1880s, early 1890s. In 1899 to 1900, he was, an ill, grave alcoholic, and life seemed to be like slipping out of him. He died in 1901 at age 36. He never acted in any play or was part of an artistic production team like he is in the film. He made posters for theater productions, and at one time he did decor. And in the movie, he's referred to as a dwarf, which is not true. He did not have dwarfism. And yes, there is a difference. And the word dwarf is debated. Toulouse-Lautrec was the son of first cousins, whose parents were also first cousins, which likely gave him a genetic disorder known as pycnodysostosis, PYCD. So dwarfism is a different condition. The disease that he likely had is also called Toulouse-Lautrec syndrome. He was around 151 centimeters, 5 feet 4.5 inches, because he broke his legs when he was a teenager, and thereafter they ceased to grow. He did speak with a lisp, and he used a cane as support, just like the movie version. There are some poster art in the film, which is inspired by Toulouse-Lautrec's art, like in Zidler's office. This is inspired by an illustration of the singer Yvette Guibert, who did sing at the Moulin Rouge. And a facade painting shows Toulouse-Lautrec's actual poster, which depicts the dance troupe of Mademoiselle Églantine, but reversed. It was never blown up like this and put on facades. An artwork featuring the dancer Chocolat appears in the background behind this person in this scene, which we will come back to later. The scene where Satine and Christian is rehearsing and Toulouse-Lautrec is in the kitchen is very, very accurate. He loved to cook and to mix concoctions, like cocktails. Some were so strong that people like the dancer Jane Avril pretended to sip them and drink, but poured the rest of the content into a plant or pot nearby. Toulouse-Lautrec hosted parties regularly in his studio. His studios, by the way, was very close to the Moulin Rouge, but not opposite it. In 1899, his studio was at 15 Avenue Frochot, and he lived on 5 Avenue Frochot, approximately 10 minutes walk from Moulin Rouge, which he frequented less and less after 1895, when some of his favorite dancers had left the venue. In this party scene, Toulouse-Lautrec wears a kimono and a boa. Yes, this is accurate, as in they have combined 2 photographs. He loved to dress up, and he loved Japan and Japanese style. And for a women's ball, he borrowed these clothes from dancer Jane Avril, including the boa. So the costume designers of the movie used these 2 photos for reference, which I really like. And yeah, he loved to dress up. Like here we see him as Pierrot and as Carmen on the arm of René Grenier. And I can in fact imagine that he would dress up as a sitar. The glasses, the pince-nez, are accurate. And although the real life Toulouse-Lautrec, he had a little bit of different hairstyles and beard styles, not bear styles. This was his usual look. So in my opinion, they could have gone for that as hair and beard style in the movie. But I am a bit torn of like how they have him crying over love, it seems, and how they have him saying that he knows love because he longs for it with every fiber of his body. It's not that this wasn't true, but he's often remembered as someone who was like a tragic figure, and the tragedy itself fueled his art. He did become an alcoholic, and that is very tragic. But his life was more joyful, and his art has more to give than people give it credit for. But to the movie's credit, I gotta say it shows him as more than cynical and tragic. And he is an active creator and actor in the play, even though that is like historically inaccurate. Moving on to Harold Zidler. Harold who? There was no man at the Moulin Rouge by the name of Harold Zidler. But there was indeed a Charles Zidler. He died in 1897, so in 1899 he had been 2 years dead. And he left the Moulin Rouge in 1892. And side question, where's Oller? It was Charles Zidler and Joseph Oller who opened the Moulin Rouge in 1889. Oller was the owner and Zidler was the manager. But in 1899, Oller ran the place, since, Zidler had not only left the building, but he had also kicked the bucket. Well, I get it. For the sake of the story, it's easier to follow one man as the owner and manager of the Moulin Rouge instead of two. And Zidler was more of a showman, like Papa, to the dancers, so it makes sense to focus on him in the film. The two of them did appear on the floor of the grand ballroom at the Moulin Rouge, but it's not entirely clear how. But Charles Zidler seems to have been more active in managing the dancers and meeting the guests, and Oller did more of the paperwork stuff. But neither of them acted in plays. They were in fact quite hard businessmen who sued their performers for breach of contract if they dared to perform elsewhere. But they were not only harsh, as Zidler had Sunday soup suppers in an apartment opposite the Moulin Rouge, dinners to which he invited everyone at the venue, including some guests. And I'm happy to see that they have included Trémolada in the film, under the name/title stage manager. Because this was a man who did indeed exist, and I had forgotten that he was even in the film. But Trémolada was Zidler's assistant, and here's a photo of him with Toulouse-Lautrec. And this photo is often labeled as being a photo of Zidler. Trémolada composed this list of cancan dancers who were active in the years 1889 to 1903. Eric Satie, not to be confused with Satine. He was a composer, and he was not a friend of Toulouse-Lautrec in real life. But they did have a relation with the same lady, artist and model Suzanne Valadon. Toulouse-Lautrec in around 1886 to 1888, and Satie in 1893. She was actually their only, love relation or girlfriend. Satie and Toulouse-Lautrec were in the same small circle of people, in the same small neighborhood, but they just didn't hang out together. And Satie did not have a shaved head or face, ever. The spectacles are accurate, though. And in 1899, Satie was living in Arcueil, south of Paris, where he had moved a year earlier. Satie is one of history's famous eccentrics, who likely was on the autism spectrum or similar. He, for example, never used an umbrella, or he used it as in he would walk even if it was pouring rain. He would hold an umbrella in his hand, but he never opened it. And he collected umbrellas. He had hundreds of them. But use them. He would rather be soaked. Also, in this scene where we see that Satie has bald minions. Well, why? Other stories about Satie is that he founded his own religion, which had only one priest and one member, him. And at one time he needed help with packing his suitcase, and he was furious because it wasn't packed according to his schedule. The two principal cancan dancers, Nini Legs in the Air and Môme Fromage, did exist. Their names or nicknames were Nini Pat en l'air and Môme Fromage, whose real names were Marie Blanchard, Hervé Widow Monnier, and André Eleng. Nini's many real names are a bit of a mystery. She was either named all of the names or one of them and went by Widow Monnier. Nini had a cancan school and taught many of the Moulin Rouge stars of the 1890s. Môme Fromage was a cancan dancer and had possibly been the lover of Moulin Rouge star La Goulue. And her nickname literally means the cheese kid or Little Miss Cheese. But Môme Fromage was in fact slang and it meant newcomer or the new girl. Môme Fromage danced at the venue in the years 1899 to 1900, and perhaps Nini as well. Yet one source from 1900 says that Nini had stopped dancing by then. Was the smiteful character trait of the movie version Nini accurate? Yes. Similar teasing did happen between the dancers. Like how the other dancers at the Moulin Rouge nicknamed Jane Avril Crazy Jane, Jeanne la Folle, and thought of her as strange because she liked arts and culture. And Nini herself had some of her students serve her as maids, and one of them, Mimosa, left because Nini didn't pay her. Chocolat, he did exist. His real name was Rafael Padilla, and he was a clown who often performed duo with the clown Fouti. They did perform together at the Moulin Rouge, but Chocolat wasn't one of the venue's like regular performers, as he seems to be in the film. In 1899, he was performing at the Nouveau Cirque with Fouti, and around this time they were captured on film by the Lumiere brothers. This man, he is listed in the credits as having appeared in the film, but he appears in a deleted scene from the ballroom, so we don't see him in the film. He was an historic character, Le Pétomane, the fart maniac. He farted melodies, he sang songs like the Marseillaise, and he blew out candles using his ah. And here is one minor character whom you just have to know who she is to even spot her. In the credit list, I read La Cha-U-Kao, and anyone familiar with Toulouse-Lautrec's art knows that name alludes to Cha-U-Kao. Cha-U-Kao, also known as Cha-U-Kao, was a female clown and a cancan dancer. She was openly lesbian and appears in this painting, together with lover and fellow dancer Gabrielle. And the Green Fairy is a historic character, despite the fact that she is made up, because she did exist in the minds of people of the era as the personification of absinthe, the popular greenish spirit, which was banned in 1915 because it was believed to make people go mad. Moving on to not historic characters. Satine, aka the Sparkling Diamond. Satine is said to be based on or inspired by the dancer Jane Avril. I don't quite understand how though. Like, Jane Avril did at times have lung problems and pneumonia, but she lived through it. Both of them have like reddish hair, and yeah, sure, they worked at the Moulin Rouge, both of them. But Satine has actually more in common with the Lady of the Camellias, a character from the book by Alexandre Dumas the Younger. The lady was based on Dumas' actual lover, Marie Duplessis, and she was a courtesan who died of tuberculosis. And the story in the Moulin Rouge film is based on The Lady of the Camellias and its opera adaptation La Traviata. There was a cancan dancer nicknamed Diamond and or even Black Diamond. And there was the previously mentioned Tour Eiffel, who is said to have died from tuberculosis, either performing the splits, well, legend, not true, but yeah, more likely after having appearing half naked and consumptuous on that cold and rainy carnival cortege. The Satine character is a kind of melting pot of white leading ladies from the 1900s to 1950. Here are some examples of her outfits and their inspirations. Like the Marilyn Monroe in Bus Stop is a direct inspiration for Satine's sparkling diamond outfit. And the style of women such as Joan Crawford and Greta Garbo inspired such outfits as this cream-colored outfit. The Audrey character wears makeup and seems to be either trans or someone who broke with gender roles. Yes, this is accurate. As in, this was a very common thing in Montmartre at the time. It's very accurate to include such a character to represent this. And in case you didn't recognize him, David Wenham is the actor who plays Faramir in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The unconscious Argentinian isn't a historic character. He doesn't even have a name. But to have his nationality be Argentinian fits with this era. Argentina and its capital, Buenos Aires, was a place where people went to seek fortune. It had a kind of Klondike or gold rush pioneer feel to it, with a lot of the so-called white slave trade, human trafficking, going in that direction. The tango number, this dance has sexual undertones, and it was danced in the brothels of Buenos Aires, just like the Argentinian says. Its origins are said to be somewhere from the border of Argentina and Uruguay. And the dance was popular in the era, and it fits with the story. The character Petite Princesse is a can-can dancer who also sings. Little persons as entertainers probably did happen at the Moulin Rouge, as so-called freak shows or side shows was a common thing in the era. And yes, Swedes, the Australian actress Kiruna Stamell is indeed named after Kiruna, the Swedish town. I have never heard of sideshow style entertainment happening at the Moulin Rouge, and not of a little person dancing can-can. But not all performances which happened are noted though. And the venue burned down in 1915, so a lot of archival material have been lost. The Bohemian, who is called the Doctor, is a special effects guy. And that is a nice reference to this much important profession, which, in theater and film was developing in this era. His style reminds me a bit of Edouard Dujardin, symbolist writer and critic. He frequented the Moulin, but yeah, the Doctor, he has a more bohemian touch to it. The Duke. He looks like the Englishman at the Moulin Rouge from this Toulouse-Lautrec work. And the Englishman was an artist by the name William Warner. The Duke's manservant is called Warner. Coincidence? I think not. And I must say the Duke is so extremely evil funny. I know the actor had very fun playing someone who's so comic book style evil. He's doing a very good job as his performance portrays the Duke as someone who comes off as having a very foul breath. There were many aristocratic men frequenting the Moulin Rouge, including Toulouse-Lautrec himself and the son of Queen Victoria. Christian's father, an elderly Englishman, he would have heard of the Moulin Rouge, and it had been open for 10 years in 1899. And the venue became a kind of must-do when on a Paris trip. He would have heard of the scandalous reputation of the place as well. Speaking of Englishmen or Englishness, this time period in France, there was an Anglomania, a special interest in Englishness, like literature and style. People like Toulouse-Lautrec, his mother, and the dancer Jane Avril, notice the English spelling of her first name, they all subscribed to this Anglomania. A few notes on the cancan costumes, which are based on performers and themes from the 1890s. So although the costumes are not historically accurate and on purpose and with intent, I do very much enjoy that they have researched and concocted a mix of popular themes from the era. And when I say I enjoy it, I don't mean that I actually enjoy the thing that it connotes. But it's accurate, as in to represent the tastes of La Belle Époque. And I need to add a brief note on the cancan of the 1890s. It went by names such as the Cha-U-Kao, quadrille or quadrille, or cancan, with different variations as in quadrille realiste, naturaliste, excentrique, etc. And it didn't look like the cancan of today. It started as a couples dance, like with two couples, as in this picture. Its origins is disputed, but it can be traced as far back as the 1820s. The film is accurate in showing the performers wearing individual costumes and like battle dance each other, even though the film cancan looks a bit too choreographed compared to the dance style of the 1890s. And don't be fooled by the old sepia-toned or black and white colored photographs, because on colorized photographs, such as this one's, you can get a taste of exactly how colorful their garments were. Now on to the movie costumes. Principal cancan dancers China Doll and Arabia. The characters and their costumes represent exoticism / orientalism. Yeah, so not something I enjoy at all, but it was very much in vogue in the 1890s. I do think the film didn't have to reproduce that to the max though, by naming them the generic Arabia and China Doll. Suggestion: how about we rename them Aisha and Cha-U-Kao? Hear me out. The two other principal cancan dancers are named after historic cancan dancers, so why not name all of them after actual performers? Side note, Aisha was Edith Piaf's grandmother. Nini Legs in the Air wears a dress which definitely is inspired by two existing garments, most obviously this one, from this mistress of ceremonies, who has mills on the side of her dress, on her cane, and on her hat, just like Nini's outfit. And La Goulue wore a dress which had a pattern consisting of mills, cats, and rats. Using this as inspiration is a very nice homage to the costumes of the performers of the old Moulin Rouge. Schoolgirl. The young girls of the era wore clothes which looked like this. Baby doll. On the same-ish theme. The dancer baby doll wears dresses like a childlike dress, what we today would call Lolita style. This was a popular theme for entertainers of the era, such as Irish woman May Belfort, who wore a baby-like frock and sang childish songs with sexual undertones. Yeah, was very popular in the era. So to include a schoolgirl and a baby doll character is that's it's on point. Tattoo. A lady who has tattoos covering large part of her body. I don't even have to mention that tattoos were an absolute no-no in this era, and up until quite recently. I mean, even I have heard old sayings like only sailors and bandits and hoes are tattooed. Like the lady portrayed by Toulouse-Lautrec, who worked in a brothel and she has actually a tattoo on her upper arm. Juno, the Roman goddess of the home, spouse of Jupiter. So antiquity was very hip in this era, and it was common to speak and write of things from antiquity, like referring to lesbian love as officiating in Lesbos with Sappho, for instance. Desirable women were likened to muses from antiquity, and dance was called the terpsichorean art after Terpsichore, the muse of dance. Harlequin. Yes, the characters Harlequin and Pierrot were staples before and after the 1890s. The era is filled with harlequins and costumes with this diamond-shaped form, like this one. Where can I get this outfit? It's fantastic. Dominatrix. Yes, of course. They existed back then as well. One of Toulouse-Lautrec's favorite brothel, La Fleur Blanche on Rue de Moulin. It had a torture room. Travesty represents cross-dressers, lesbian women, and gender nonconformists. People who found a safe-ish space in Montmartre, and they were a common sight at the Moulin. Urchin means street kid, and this dancer is a kind of working class reference because she wears some markers of the working class of the era, like her skirt is a quilt, for example. And there were plenty of workers in and around Montmartre, and a lot of kids. And now I'll just comment on things from the movie, like quite randomly. The opening sequence, yay for old film or these like shadow style theater projections. Shadow theater was a popular thing, and it was performed at places such as the Cabaret Chat Noir. The film is set in 1899 to 1900, as I've said. And Christian says that 1899 is the summer of love. I've never heard it referred to as that, so I suppose it's a 1960s reference. As we follow the camera up to Montmartre, we see that there's a gate to the neighborhood. This is not accurate. There were no gates to Montmartre. But the hellmouth, which serves as the gate entrance, comes from Cabaret de l'Enfer, meaning the cabaret of hell. And what was next to it? Le ciel, heaven. If there were preacher men around, like the man by the gates in the movie, they sure had a lot to do, as there were lots of stuff for them to be appalled by. Regarding the reconstruction of the Moulin Rouge, I find it fantastic. It's accurate as far as possible, aside from one thing, which we will get back to. There were flag decorations at the Moulin Rouge, and the lamps are on point. And the lamps were actually illuminated by something which was something very, very special at this time. And it became an attraction in itself: electricity. That is why the pitch song for the play Spectacular Spectacular includes the sentence "electric lights, machinery, ooh, the electricity." The Moulin Rouge was if I think it was the first, but it was at least one of the first spaces in Paris which was illuminated by electricity. Toulouse-Lautrec even showed that in advertising for the venue. The round, floaty, yellow things are the same type lamp that the dancer Jane Avril is clinging onto in this photo. I'll get to that one inaccurate thing now. The ballroom at the Moulin Rouge seems to have been brown or wood-colored. Moulin Brun. So the lamps were golden and bronzed, but the rest of the place seems to have been very not colorful. The ballroom was not painted red as it is in the movie. The place was illuminated by a greenish stage light, which makes it look green in Toulouse-Lautrec's art. And also, this is something that's quite hard to find info about, like what colors were the walls? But the actual mille decor, which was visible from the street, was bright red, just as today. The sign by the orchestra saying cancan or hunkadola, etc., did exist. And this was not only at the Moulin Rouge. So this is the ballroom at the Bal Tabarin. So in this image, the sign says quadrille or quadrille. Because, the Moulin Rouge was not the only place where the cancan was performed. The elephant did exist. This is fairly common knowledge as far as internet curiosities go. It wasn't as decorated as in the movie, at least not its face and its head. And it wasn't a boudoir like in the movie, but it had a stage which was used by Le Pétomane, the professional artist, and it had Tunisian dances, and some say there was also an opium den inside it. Now, let me tell you about a big inaccuracy in the film. Because we see how the venue is partially demolished and turned into a theater. And in the film, this happens in 1900. The actual Moulin Rouge was not turned into a theater until 1903. Yeah, I told you it would be a nerdy review. So up until then, it was a palace, like an entertainment palace, with several different stages and a ballroom, just like in the film. Thereafter, it was a theater for revue-style operettas and such, like La Belle de New York and the shows of Miss Donguette. And some of the shows of Miss Donguette had costumes which were designed by the Swedish artist and designer Geijer Rolf, second wife of Ernst Rolf. She designed the costumes in the late 1920s. Okay, now I got a bit derailed since I found a Scandinavian Moulin Rouge truck and I just went for it. So, I believe that this scene, where Satine enters the Moulin Rouge from the ceiling, is inspired by these types of performances from the Moulin Rouge from like the 1950s or thereabouts. Christian says that the Moulin Rouge was where the rich and powerful came to play with the beautiful creatures of the underworld. Yes, it was. So that's accurate. As I mentioned earlier, there were aristocratic men frequenting the place. There was a lot of so-called slumming, where rich people went to places of ill repute or semi-dangerous neighborhoods to seek like a kind of dangerous thrill. But this was a pleasure palace for everyone, not only for the rich, but for all of society. Like it had something for everyone, for anyone who could pay the entrance fee, which was about 50 cents in that times, the currency of that era. And in the film we see only suits and top hats in the shots like this one. And yes, I get it, because the cinematic effect, and it looks great. But there is no one wearing poor or working class clothing, aside from two of the bohemians, Satie and the doctor. And here's is an example of non-rich clientele of the Moulin Rouge. So it's a depiction of, yeah, pimps and their girls. And Norwegian writer Amalie Skram visited the Moulin together with Hulda and Arne Garborg, and she was pickpocketed. There were, of course, non-criminal, non-rich clientele visiting the venue as well. Is anything missing from the movie, in my opinion? Yeah, I mean, the poor, like I just mentioned, and the lesbians. We do see a brief, like, female kiss in the New Year's party in the studio. And these two appear for literally 1 second in the introduction of the Moulin Rouge. They are sporting gender non-conforming looks as they present feminine but wear masculine style clothes. The person to the right reminds me of Missy de Morny, a lesbian woman who performed at the Moulin Rouge alongside her partner Colette in 1907. And the above duo, they are wearing a nod to the green carnation flower, which you have seen if you have ever looked at photos of Oscar Wilde. The green carnation flower, it was a code symbolizing same-sex attraction and or queerness. Another anachronistic reference is Marlene Dietrich and her top hat style. And an 1890s reference is the topless top hat lady who might be the second Nini Pat en l'air. It's complicated. And in this 1/2 second long clip, or short, we see the two principal dancers, Aisha and Cha-U-Kao, I mean Arabian China doll, in their underwear doing something. And in the same room, we see what seems to be, well, same-sex couples engaged in something. But the speed and editing makes this impossible to catch. As far as I could tell, there were no ladies dancing with each other on the actual ballroom in the movie. But this was a very common occurrence. And many of the cancan dancers were described as traveling from Cythera to Lesbos, meaning that they were part of the sex trade, metaphorically speaking, of the love goddess Aphrodite and her island Cythera, Cyprus. But that they, after Cythera, went to Lesbos and had relations with women in the manner of Sappho, who lived on Lesbos. There are some details in the film which show the diversity of entertainments available at the venue. So like boxing, donkey rides do flash by, as we see Petite Princesse on a donkey. There's a mermaid woman, two tattooed men are waltzing, and there's also a snake charmer. Here they could have included two women waltzing with each other. I wasn't going to comment on accuracy when it came to costumes and clothing, but I'll say that these ladies are the most accurately dressed characters in the movie. They're a group of seamstresses who are repairing some textile backstage, and their clothes is a very 1890s silhouette, and all of them are sporting a hairstyle popular in the era, a trademark hairstyle of the Moulin Rouge dancer La Goulue. In the film, everyone at the Moulin Rouge speaks Australian. Yeah, that's what you get with an Aussie director, main actress, and filmed in Australia. There was at least one Australia-affiliated person at the original Moulin Rouge. Well, there were more than one, of course, but one of whom I know of. Artist Charles Conder, who was British, but he moved to Australia when he was 16, and he was connected to the Australian art scene. He later moved to Paris. Satine says she wants to be like the great Sarah Bernard. Sarah Bernard was indeed a famous actress in this time, so it's accurate that Satine, an aspiring actress, had her as her idol. The Gothic Tower, it did exist, but it's hard to find any information about it. Some sources states that it was connected to the Moulin Rouge, and that it was used just as it's shown in the film, as a receiving place for women to meet their clientele. That is the only mention I've found of a room connected to the sex trade of the Moulin Rouge. And yeah, this is also not something which is very written about. But we have a quote from Charles Zidler. My theatre will be neither cafe, nor cabaret, nor brothel, but all three rolled up in one. There were maisons de rendezvous, love hotels, in the area, where one could rent rooms for encounters. And many of the dancers lived very close to the venue, so if they wanted to, they could bring someone home. The Singing Man in the Moon is a nice reference to the film Le Voyage dans la Lune, A Trip to the Moon, by Georges Méliès. Regarding the overall feel of the movie, it shows the Moulin Rouge of the 1890s through the lens of our time. How it must have been to be there as a person from the 1890s, like the speed, the overwhelm, the noise, and the explosion of colors. Well, not the venue itself, but everything else. But funny note also, when the movie was new around 2001, the fast editing was so intense for some people, and at present it feels almost slow compared to some social media editing. But the fast editing is actually a pity in many ways, and in some scenes, like this one introducing the Moulin Rouge, there are so many blink and you will miss it moments. There's so many nice details in the film which just flutters by. And one more thing. The movie doesn't depict life in the 1890s. The era is used as a kind of backdrop with anachronistic elements added to it. Spectacular, spectacular. A play set in India. Were there plays set in India in Paris at this time? Yes. Toulouse-Lautrec did decor for the play Le Chariot de Terracotta, the Terracotta Chariot, in 1895. And this is an Indian drama by writer Shudraka. It's a classic piece of Sanskrit literature. And here's some of the decor that he made, as well as the poster. And yeah, as I said earlier, Toulouse-Lautrec didn't have a role in the play, or any play for that matter, but he did do many posters for theatre plays. Did Toulouse-Lautrec and his bohemian friends have a manifesto, or a collective idea from which they made their art? Well, not like freedom, beauty, truth, and love. But they wanted to break with the academic tradition of their tutors and predecessors. Toulouse-Lautrec went to classes held by artists Léon Bonnat and later Fernand Cormon. Bonnat did conservative portraits, and Cormon was famous for his historic paintings, like this biblical scene. Puvis de Chavannes was a popular artist who had a studio at the foot of Montmartre, and his paintings look like this. Milky visions of muses in antiquity. Fun fact, the model for all of these ladies was Suzanne Valadon, the artist who was the only girlfriend of Toulouse-Lautrec and Satie. So Toulouse-Lautrec and his friends wanted to show actual contemporary life as it was, not some idealized version of the past. Here's Toulouse-Lautrec's parody of the Puvis de Chavannes painting. You can see the muses, but you can also see him and his friends hanging out in this sacred grove, and a self-portrait, which you can see in this little cutout. It has been interpreted from his stance that, Toulouse-Lautrec is pissing on the work of Puvis de Chavannes. Toulouse-Lautrec's generation showed actual living women portrayed as themselves, not as muses of antiquity. They wanted to portray the speed and vitality of the modern life which they were a part of. So those are my thoughts, and that was all I had on this subject. Although I'm sure there's always more to say, and other sources to consult. I did my best to get all the facts right and to tell an interesting story. Et malheureusement, je ne parle pas français. Je suis désolée.